Penn State just had 4 transfer portal recruits on campus this past weekend. But are they going to be able to land any of them?
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Penn State fans? That is right. You are Locked On Nittany Lions. Thanks so much for making us your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Zach Seyko, bringing you all things Penn State Nittany Lions coverage each and every single day of the week. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege and use promo code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Today's episode is also brought to you by Team Ticker, the high-tech sports sign with that retro look. Show your team pride and go to teamticker.com and enter code LOCKEDON to get $50 off your online order. And before we get to any of the conversation about the transfer portal, some other Penn State football news. For all the latest when it comes to Penn State football, men's basketball, more conversations about wrestling and hockey on the way, subscribe to the channel. Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. It's that easy. It's that simple for all the latest and greatest, the analysis on those teams. It's right here at Locked On Nittany Lions. We're talking transfer portal. Penn State had a busy weekend with 4 players on campus visiting Happy Valley. And we'll see what is the verdict as far as landing any of those first 4 initial visits. Talking about some other Penn State football related news, including recruiting in the final segment, but Drew Allar popping up in the headlines. Riley Thompson, Theo Johnson make their decisions. But I think everybody wants to know about, okay, what players could be transferring into Penn State, right? As there were 4 of them on campus visiting just this past weekend. We'll start with the name that everybody knows, and some people love him, some people don't. That's Julian Fleming, former 5-star wide receiver that was an Ohio State Buckeye for the past few years and shunned Penn State when he came down to his final decision. But visited Happy Valley. It was a quick visit, but it seemed like everything went pretty well. There's not a lot of intel here, but this isn't Fleming's first and certainly not last visit. I will say this across the country. There are quite a number of schools that are going to be vying for his playing time, for his services. He's already got a visit lined up with Nebraska. And what's important about that visit, not only Matt Rule, former Penn State coach, Penn State player, coached in the NFL, right? Going up against competition in the Big Ten, but fellow teammate Kyle McCord is also going to be enacting the buddy system here. Is this a package deal? Kyle McCord and Julian Fleming going to a new school together. It's going to be tough for Penn State to pull off if that's what it takes to get Julian Fleming to be a Nittany Lion, because there's really no space for Kyle McCord in this case. But what Penn State does have going for it is, well, there's a need at wide receiver, and I'm pretty sure that was a conversation that, Julian, you will be competing to be the number 1 wide receiver. He has that prior relationship with Penn State and James Franklin, and even though they missed out, Penn State has shown that prior relationships with recruits do go a long way in the era of the transfer portal. James Franklin has said that himself. But I got to admit, Nebraska's pretty appealing in this case, okay? They're in a rebuild. There are a lot of opportunities for Julian Fleming to see playing time there. Matt Rule coached in the NFL. How many times do you think that comes up in conversation? Even though he didn't succeed with the Carolina Panthers, and honestly, Frank Reich didn't either. Who is going to with the Panthers? I think Matt Rule is a really good coach. But the bottom line of this is Matt Rule has that experience, and he probably uses that as a pitch. I can develop you to get to the NFL. I know what it takes. I know what coaches are looking for, and I will put you in the best position possible. Now, James Franklin, of course, was a wide receivers coach with the Green Bay Packers, but Matt Rule being a head coach, little bit different there, even though he was fired by Carolina. Nebraska, friendly reminder, they are in the Big Ten, so it's the same level of play. It's not like this is a Group 5 school recruiting Julian Fleming. And then the chance to still play with your quarterback. What kind of relationship do Kyle McCord and Julian Fleming actually have? It seems like a pretty good one, because the fact that you are willing to visit together at a Big Ten school kind of tells me everything that I need to know. He could be the number one in that offense. He could get the chance to be with the quarterback that he is familiar with from his time at Ohio State. Again, remember, they didn't go to the same school, but they're relatively both went to Pennsylvania high schools, Southern Columbia for Julian Fleming, St. Joe's Prep for Kyle McCord. And both of those schools are actually fresh off of state title games. Just a little fun fact there. Kentucky and Georgia are also rumored to be in the mix. So this isn't just Nebraska versus Penn State head to head. This could be schools from the SEC. Remember, Kentucky just got a new quarterback, actually, fellow Georgia, not fellow, but former Georgia Bulldog. Coincidentally enough, Brock Vandergriff is going to transfer there and most likely be the starter, definitely compete. My verdict here, Julian Fleming, like his high school days when they were recruiting him, will be tough. Just because what does Georgia think about this? Georgia is going to be losing a receiver in Yazid Haynes. Everydayers might remember him from the time that he was committed briefly to Penn State, but he is in the transfer portal, leaving the Georgia Bulldogs, or at least projected to. There's just a lot of competition. Georgia, Kentucky, Nebraska, whoever it is. I think in Fleming's case, I don't think it's about the NIL. I really do think it's about relationships and playing time, which Penn State has going for it, but so does Nebraska. So does Kentucky. Where does he ultimately want to end up? Probably at a place where he can compete to be a number one wide receiver. There are other schools that can offer that, maybe with a little more NIL incentive. Let's see how competitive Penn State is going to get with Julian Fleming if they still believed him to be that potential wide receiver that they saw just a few years back. Will be tough, but I would never say never in this case. I'd put Penn State maybe at 2, or I really would put Nebraska up there, especially if Kyle McCord is going to transfer there and shows interest. I would put those two together being the differentiating factor that Penn State cannot duplicate. Let's move on to Jaylin Lucas, former Indiana specialist. The Hoosier was named the first team All-America in 2022 because of his kick returning abilities. Now, what does Penn State need a running back? Well, because of those kick returning abilities. And he's not just some running back, right? Nicholas Singleton, Katron Allen, those are your running backs. See what Trey Potts decides to do. I think he actually still has that COVID year of eligibility. He's most likely going to, if he does return, would be that third running back in the system again. But when you look at Jaylin Lucas, this is a true definition of an athlete. Yes, he can line up at running back, but he's got a smaller build. He's 5'9". He's that shifty, speedy type of guy that you're looking for in an Andy Kotelnicki type of offense that is going to spread defenses out, attack you horizontally before tricking you and baiting you so that they can attack you vertically. I think Penn State's been missing that for a little bit. And KJ Hamler's probably somebody that comes to mind for a lot of you just because it's a similar size and build. But KJ Hamler never really lined up in the backfield, was never used in creative ways. He returned punts, he returned kicks, but this is truly a case where Penn State is looking for a special teams gamer. I think they want to get Jaylin Lucas. I think they want to replace Jaylin Lucas or replace Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen with Jaylin Lucas because you don't want to open that up to injuries. And I will admit that Jaylin Lucas is better at returning kicks and punts than any of Singleton, Allen. Daquan Hardy was really good this past season, but we saw some small things, some nuances that Jaylin Lucas is better at that Daquan Hardy still is working on. Caden Saunders, is he going to compete, right? But Jaylin Lucas, because you can line him up in so many different ways, a variety of ways in this Andy Kotelnicki offense that is going to be complex, that is going to have a lot of different formations and moving parts to it. Lucas makes a lot of sense. He's not going to be boxed in as just, well, you're a kick returner, you're a punt returner, you're going to line up in the backfield. You're going to line up in shotgun, you're going to line up in the slot. You're going to be used in so many different ways. And I think that's very appealing to Lucas, right? Use that speed because Penn State couldn't stretch defenses this past season. They were hypothetically supposed to, but Dante Cephas never lived up to, I guess, those expectations. And maybe he does. So then you combine those two things. Now, instead of just having Cephas, who is gradually coming on, you now have Lucas and Cephas together to really open up that speed. It felt like Penn State was missing that speed element at the wide receiver position. My verdict here is favorable just because it's the case of you have openings. at kick returner, at punt returner. I don't know what Daquan Hardy is going to do. I don't know what Caden Saunders is going to do, right? I'm not trying to imply that I know, well, one's leaving for the draft, one's leaving for the portal. That's not what I'm saying. At Penn State, if they're looking for a return specialist, that still means that there are question marks at kick returner and punt returner because Singleton, Allen, and Hardy and Saunders are all hypothetical returning starters in this case, but you're looking to upgrade. And I think that's intriguing here. I say favorable because one of the first visits on Lucas's list, but you get to stay inside of the Big Ten and you get a role that's promised to you, or maybe not necessarily promised, but pitched to you that wouldn't necessarily be the case anywhere else. I like this one for Penn State, and I would be surprised if he lands somewhere else outside of Happy Valley. Andre Greene is next up on our list, former North Carolina wideout. Nothing ever really materialized here with the Tar Heels. Highly touted prospect. Let's talk about the intangibles here, his player profile in this case. 6'2", 200 pounds in 2023. Very quiet, didn't see a lot of playing time. 2 receptions for 17 yards. Did play in the bowl game leading up to the season. I'm a former consensus 4-star, a top 15 wide receiver on average in the nation, right? Top 15 wide receivers. Some outlets like Rivals had him as high as 5. Others had him firmly in the top 20 at a very minimum. And then a consensus top 3 player in Virginia. So some people might sense a common theme here. A Virginia player. Okay. Now, why is he interested in Penn State? Marcus Hagans. This is where the influence of Marcus Hagans comes into the fold. Coach Hagans very hard at work as the wide receivers head coach now in his going into his second full season. And this is where he can really lay out the blueprint of what he wants to do. And we're seeing it. We're seeing it. He's getting Jaylin Lucas, Julian Fleming, right? Andre Greene Jr. in this case. He's going to be visiting UVA, Virginia, the Cavaliers on the 15th, but we're seeing those Virginia connections and those strong relationships from Hagans pay off that Andre Greene here would probably pick Penn State over UVA in this case. And it's not hard to make that logical conclusion from the fact that Penn State just has a better football program than UVA right now. But let's look at the quote. Let's look at the thought process from Greene. Greene said this on his social media. I had a blast on my official visit with Penn State. Happy Valley is truly an amazing place for many reasons. And with that, I'm going to make this verdict favorable. I think the prior relationship with Marcus Hagans is going to pay off. It's going to pay dividends. I think now having James Franklin in the fold, new offensive coordinator, new opportunities, and some untapped potential here that you're probably going to have a better chance figuring out at Penn State than you are at home with Virginia. But don't rule out the Cavaliers just because it's an ACC program. They've struggled the past few years. They took away Marcus Hagans. They have Anthony Poindexter right now on the staff, right? All those Virginia State influences, just because they're at Penn State doesn't mean someone's going to pass up the opportunity to play at home. But I think in this case, they will. I'm just saying, don't rule out the Cavaliers. They'll try to put up a fight. Last player that made an early visit for Penn State out of the transfer portal, and that is Alan Herron. I've introduced this prospect on previous episodes. Division II, shorter university offensive tackle. This team did not do that well. They went 3-8, but he has the athletic profile that has gained him a dozen plus offers in this case. He posted some snippets on his Instagram of appearing in Beaver Stadium, so it seemed like he enjoyed the visit, but we don't have an official statement or any quotes that's saying, hey, Herron says this or that. But it's good to see that Penn State was up on one of his first visits, but he's got SEC offers. He's got ACC. My verdict here is difficult but possible because Penn State, like other places, are probably going to pitch that, hey, come in, develop, be a backup, and then in the following year, be a starter. That's what they did with JB Nelson at Lackawanna College, coming in and saying that you are going to be a backup, but we see you developing into a really quality starter and then go from there, right? And Penn State has the track record, the proven track record with Phil Troutwine and James Franklin in this case. It's going to be difficult with schools that they're left for broke here. They say, hey, we're going to get you in and you're going to compete and start right away and we'll develop you along the way. If he's looking to start right away and maybe change his process up a little bit, then That's going to be difficult for Penn State to compete with. However, I think he definitely needs to develop, and Penn State would be the right program to do so. And you can never have too much offensive line depth. Herron is not necessarily a need, but I would go closer that it's almost a must-have because of that potential, because of that need to you never know what happens here. And we're still waiting on decisions, right? From Caden Wallace and other guys that may or may not come back, right? So with that being said, speaking of decisions that we do know about, Theo Johnson, Riley Thompson, what did they have to say? What are their plans going into the 2024 season? And Drew Allar was in the headlines as well. We'll discuss it in just a moment. Let's hear from one of our sponsors on today's episode, and that is eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. It's what brings home the winning trophy, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to its peak performance. From superchargers to roof racks to exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you are looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. And with all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. And today's episode is also sponsored by Team Ticker. And the viewers, the watching audience can see it right there. That is a Team Ticker sign. My audio listeners, I want to do you the justice that you deserve, because Team Ticker is the one-of-a-kind sports sign for Nittany Lion fans. I love this thing. Never miss a game when it comes to football, men's and women's basketball, baseball, soccer, softball. Team Ticker has you covered. Truly, never miss a game with the high-tech retro display that provides a countdown to the next big game, as well as daily updates for the latest team news, stats, schedule, standings, and much more. The mobile app is super easy to use. It's smart sign, so it connects to your phone, the smart app, and is able to link up with the internet, so those updates are, in fact, up to date. And it's easy to hang up on the wall. I had it up and running in a matter of seconds. Each sign is officially licensed, meeting high quality standards, and it's assembled by hand in the United States. Team Ticker is the ultimate upgrade to your Nittany Lions sports collection. Once you hang it on the wall, you're going to be the talk of all your fellow Penn State fans. If you're looking for that one eye-catching item to showcase your team pride, or a gift for that special Nittany Lions fan, go to teamticker.com and pick up your Team Ticker today. Team Ticker is a one-of-a-kind sports sign. From now until the end of the holiday season, Team Ticker wants to help out you. If you go to teamticker.com and use promo code Locked On, you will receive $50 off your Team Ticker purchase. The perfect gift idea for that special Nittany Lions fan. Teamticker.com, $50 off with promo code Locked On when you make your purchase. Team Ticker, the one-of-a-kind sports sign for you Nittany Lion fans. And the Locked On Podcast Network is proud of this one, as Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows covering each and every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel only from Locked On. Riley Thompson, Theo Johnson, who's staying, who's going? Well, we'll start with Thompson, since he is, in fact, returning. Thompson, starting punter this past season for Penn State, came to Happy Valley out of the transfer portal, was at FAU, Florida Atlantic, and decided to transfer and had a really good season for Penn State. He's coming back. There was a debate as far as what his eligibility was going to be, because he was a freshman at Florida Atlantic and then transfers, and then he has sophomore eligibility at Penn State. But now we know from the NCAA that he has 2 more years of eligibility. Whether he uses all of them, that's yet to be the case, but he's at least returning for 2024, possibility of 2025, because he is 23 going on 24. So he is a little bit older. Maybe he has plans to get another degree, get a master's in a certain subject, who knows, or just finish out his education. Whatever his education plans are, they now can line up if he wants to play 2 more full ball at Penn State. But He could just play in 2024, maybe decide to go into the NFL draft because, really good season. It makes sense now why Alex Bacchetta entered the transfer portal because he wasn't going to beat the competition that was returning in Riley Thompson. This is good news because Penn State also doesn't have to go out and recruit another specialist. They don't need to go hunt for a punter in the transfer portal again. So this is a major win for Penn State. It's not guaranteed that you have him for 2 seasons, but you at least have him for 1, and that's a start. He's a veteran. We saw how good he was in the Big Ten this past season. Like the style of punting. I like that rugby style, right? And Penn State does too. So to have Riley Thompson back, another veteran on special teams, he's also your holder, right? He's punting, but he's also holding PATs, field goals. This is important to get back, and you just get a leader. I wouldn't be surprised if he's a captain next season on the special teams unit. That's still to be said. Maybe that's a little premature since it's only his second year in the program. But I just think as an older player, someone who was very good, adjusted to the system very well, outstanding person. Just I enjoy talking with him, going to interviews and speaking with him and hearing him answer those questions. Penn State is a winner in this case by being able to retain Thompson for at least 1 year, possibly 2. Now, Theo Johnson, we saw this one coming. We did. We talked about it on Locked On Nittany Lions, and Theo Johnson is going to declare for the draft. It makes sense because not his official profile, but draft scouts, anonymous draft scouts, have put him as a day 2 tight end. Maybe the possibility with a combine and a pro day that he does maybe become a late day 1 first round pick. That's right. Johnson, I figured he was going to declare, but I also thought that he was going to play in the bowl game. And we were spot on with that prediction. The everydayers knew that too, because he's a good role model, captain. This decision that he's making is an impressionable on the young guys, good impression for them. But just listen to the interviews that have been posted on any of these channels, on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts, and just listen to Theo Johnson, what he says about this team, the emotion, what he says about James Franklin. He would run through a brick wall for James Franklin. So I was never in my mind if Theo Johnson was going to declare for the draft, and you have to capitalize on where your stock is right now. Was it an All-America type of season? No, but when draft scouts say, hey, we view you as a minimum of a 2nd or 3rd round pick, you have to go. You do. Brenton Strange, same case. Theo Johnson probably got some advice there from Strange, his former teammate. But if the NFL is going to view you as a day 2 tight end, and that's because of his size and athleticism, his attributes transfer well in today's modern NFL, more of a passing type of attack. It's going to be difficult if he lands with the right team, the right program, develops as a 6'6", 260-pound unicorn with all the athleticism, the toughness, the tenacity, the smarts, the leadership. Theo Johnson really has everything that an NFL team is looking for in this case. So no surprises here. No surprise that he's playing in this Peach Bowl against Ole Miss. We talked about it. We discussed it. We called it here on this show, and that's why you subscribe to this channel to get those picks, those takes first before anybody else. Now all the eyes are on Tyler Warren. Tight end, split reps, was tight end 1, tight end 2, 1A, 1B in this case. It could enter the draft. He could enter the draft, but I don't think he will. I think he will come back personally because look at the way this happens. Penn State almost has this blueprint, this plan, this trajectory for the tight ends, and it's working. Brenton Strange comes back for an extra season, could have left, but decided to come back, play 1 more season. Boom, 2nd round pick with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Theo Johnson actually could have left last offseason, if you can believe that. Could have left last offseason, but instead comes back and plays, and his draft stock is doing very well at the time. Tyler Warren, I think, should be in a similar case here. Come back, be that official tight end 1. You're not really splitting anything. You don't know who's better, who's in competition. I think Khalil Dinkins, Andrew Rapplier, Luke Reynolds, the 5-star tight end, entering the program, right? Enrolling early. That's a strong group, but you have an actual leader and not a split between essentially a split between the tight end position where Tyler Warren's better on this day. Theo Johnson, right? Everybody's going to look to Tyler Warren as that lead tight end. As for the guy that's going to be throwing the football to Tyler Warren, returning starting quarterback Drew Allar, made headlines recently, and for good reason. For good reason. He was nominated to the 2024 Heisman contenders early watch list. 10 players, mostly quarterbacks, but no surprise there. But the national media, 24/7 sports, recognizing that Drew Allar definitely needs to be in this conversation, especially since we know why. Andy Kotelnicki coming into the fold, and he's supposed to take Drew Allar to that next level where Mike Yurcich was supposed to, but could not. Some of the other names on this list, and no surprises, Jalen Milroe, Quinn Ewers, the Texas starting quarterback who's supposed to return, and Andy Kotelnicki's former quarterback over at Kansas, Jalen Daniels, if he can play a fully healthy season. He hasn't really been able to. Carson Beck is expected to return for Georgia. J.J. McCarthy, he's only on this list because he could return to Michigan, and he might go to the NFL. We don't know for sure. The one and only running back in the top 10 contenders for the early watch list, Ollie Gordon out of Oklahoma State. Really good player, young player as well, will be a veteran next season. I like what I saw out of him when I watched a little bit of Big 12 football here and there. Jackson Dart, Penn State's going to play him in the Peach Bowl. So Jackson Dart versus Drew Allar, a battle of two hypothetical 2024 Heisman contenders. And then LSU quarterback Garrett Nussmeier, who's going to take over. He's the assumed starter for Jaden Daniels, who had an incredible season with the Tigers and is going to go on to the NFL after winning the Heisman. So 2024 contenders, Drew Allar cracks this list. I promised you an update at the defensive coordinator search. One name is off the big board. Plus, some recruiting news as players are flipping, players are decommitting. Does Penn State have a chance to land any of these prospects? We'll discuss in just a moment. Let's talk about another one of our sponsors on today's episode, and that is PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They are the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS. It's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more than or less than on a 2 to 6 player stat projection and watch those winnings roll in. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. PrizePicks is really simple to play. You can make your picks and submit your entry in less than 60 seconds. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types are what makes PrizePicks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. And with the PrizePicks reboot policy, your entries will stay in play even if your player gets injured. For NFL games, top 25 college football matchups, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and doesn't return in the second half, that player is then rebooted. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with injury insurance. So now what do you got to do? You go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use promo code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege with promo code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. And in this final segment, let's discuss the defensive coordinator search update and then get to some of that recruiting news where Penn State maybe has a chance for some key prospects here. Joe Rossi is off the big board for the defensive coordinator spot. This was a name that people wanted to watch. Coach in his mid-40s, has worked his way up, coached at Rutgers, then Minnesota, was the linebackers coach, then defensive coordinator and linebackers coach. He's accepting that same position to coach the defense over at Michigan State. So Jonathan Smith, the Big Ten just gets tougher and tougher and tougher. Whether it's adding the schools from the Pac-12, now the Pac-2, whatever's going on, and then Oregon State head coach, now Michigan State head coach Jonathan Smith having his impact felt, along with Kirk Cignetti over at Indiana, taking away Ola Adams from Penn State's staff. Now Jonathan Smith taking away an option for Penn State at defensive coordinator. I mean, people are raving and ranting about this, saying that this is a huge get for Michigan State. At least it's a good start at rebuilding the program to what everyone thinks it can be for the Spartans. And people like the idea of Joe Rossi. I mean, he's still a younger coach, has a good background. His style, his scheme fit what Manny Diaz was doing in Happy Valley. So there wouldn't have been that much of a change. But again, in my opinion, I still think and believe that the right choice, the only choice, is Anthony Poindexter. Who better to continue Manny Diaz's defense in the system than the guy who was the co-defensive coordinator right next to him, helping him scheme, helping him game plan all along. Anthony Poindexter is the right choice. So as some of these other coaching candidates go off of the big board for Penn State's defensive coordinator search, you'd still like Penn State to have the opportunity to interview, engage the interest, and go through the interview process. But it sounds like Michigan State found their guy. And Penn State, I hope they weren't late to the party, and I hope that they just were not that interested. I think Anthony Poindexter is the right and only hire in this case. Let's get to that little bit of recruiting news. Just a couple of prospects here that Penn State has been keeping a watch on. The everydayers maybe remember his name from the summer because we talked about him a little bit. Jalen Hornsby flipped his commitment. He had been rumored to flip to Penn State for quite some time. It was going back and forth between Penn State and Texas A&M. Well, now he has flipped from the Aggies, not to Penn State, but guess who? Syracuse. Syracuse and Fran Brown. And this one makes a lot of sense here. Jalen Hornsby from the New Jersey area, coached by former Penn State running back Bill Belton at Winslow Township High School. And it was interesting that he was committed to Texas A&M for as long as he was. I mean, this is a wide receiver. This is a position of need. Penn State was in play for a lot of the time, but Syracuse, they're ranked as one of the worst recruiting classes in 2024. There are a lot more opportunities, less competition here. Jalen Hornsby is a good wide receiver. It would have been nice to have him in the class of 2024 for Penn State, but he stays closer to home, New Jersey, going to Syracuse up in New York. He's been rumored to be flipping for a while, and then the change to go away from Jimbo Fisher to Mike Elko. All of that changed, but there's the impact of Fran Brown again. I can't help but bring up the impact that Fran Brown is having on the Northeast thus far, really revamping this class of 2024 that just wasn't good to begin with, but now he's starting to make it a little bit respectable. And then 2025, 2026 is where we're going to start to see what Fran Brown is going to do to be a thorn in the side. I mean, they just flipped a running back commit from Pitt. And I'll give a shout out to Pat Korvler from Black Shoe Diaries, because he said that the likes of the Virginia schools, Maryland, Pitt, are really going to suffer from Fran Brown being the head coach at Syracuse. Another prospect that Penn State fans should keep an eye on, because right now, according to On3, he is projected to Penn State just based on visits and conversations and everything else. But that's Jabri Coleman. Now, why is Coleman in the headlines? 4-star running back, Motep charter in the state of Pennsylvania, 5A school, actually just won the state championship over Peters Township. Coleman, if you're watching this, listening to it, congratulations to your team and yourself on winning the state championship. But he's decommitted from Georgia. This is an interesting timeline here. You win a state title game, and then you decommit from the Bulldogs. Committed pretty early. He's a class of 2025 running back. He's a top 200 player overall. And he's going to the Bulldogs, but not anymore. This decision came really early. Jaywan Sider, Penn State running backs coach, was in attendance. What conversations were they having? Is this the signs of something brewing? Maybe, but not in Penn State's favor. I promise this isn't Locked On Syracuse. I really promise you that. Syracuse is just having that impact. And why I bring them up again, why I'm bringing up Fran Brown again. Who was Fran Brown? Where was he coaching before he took the Syracuse head coaching job? He was an assistant coach with the Georgia Bulldogs. In an interview, Jabri Coleman said that he has a really good relationship with Fran Brown. He explained that was his lead recruiter, at least one of them in this case. Now he's up at Syracuse, closer to home, Pennsylvania to New York. Penn State right now at least projects to land him, but as he's probably going to visit Syracuse. I think that interview is pretty telling. You don't shout out a coach unless they had a kind of impact on you, the kind that's going to get you to commit to wherever they are stationed at. Also, Penn State has 2 running back commits in the class of 2025 already. Tyke Hayes and Keandre Barker, 2 4-star running backs. Is Penn State interested in taking a third? What does that say about the current running? I know you're going to lose Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen to the same draft, but Quentin Martin is going to be coming in very soon. He had a 92-yard touchdown in his Pennsylvania State Championship game. There's going to be a lot of competition. Corey Smith out in Wisconsin, another 4-star, a speedster at the running back position. Is there really room left for another running back commit? Maybe there is because Coleman's just that talented, but does he want to walk into that situation? Whereas Syracuse, you would be the face of the running back room to start very early and often. We'll see, but it's just Fran Brown and Syracuse popping up again, going to these head-to-head recruiting battles with Penn State. And for all the latest on the Nittany Lions, whether it's football, recruiting, transfer portal, men's basketball, hockey, wrestling, we're going to have those conversations coming up very soon with some experts close to the team. For all of that and more, subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast to get that latest information. It'll all be right here on Locked On Nittany Lions.